as I talked about with the Green Bay Packers, sometimes you'll have fan bases that are just fucking spoiled. And they act spoiled. They act like spoiled, petulant fucking brats. And I don't necessarily mean that to knock them. It just kind of is what it is. And the culture that that team has cultivated creates an environment where those fans have the luxury to act as such. And maybe at some point down the road, I will with the Chicago Cubs, for an example. I was kind of a similar way in the 90s with the Bulls. But I look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, and this is another situation where you've got a fan base that is really spoiled and very bratty. It just is what it is. I get the disappointment of your team not getting to the Super Bowl, and based off of the championship expectations set in that organization over the years, where this team's played in what, 8 Super Bowls, won a total of 6 of them. Um, I can get the frustration with wanting to get back there, and especially when you have a franchise running back or a quarterback, you have a franchise running back, you have a franchise wide receiver, you've got a big three, you've got this continuity in your organization. You hear for years people talk about how your organization one of the best in football because it is. You feel like you should have more Lombardi trophies than the 6 that your organization already does. You feel like Big Ben should have more than 2. You feel like Mike Tomlin should have more than 1, and da 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 da. But it seems like so often I'll see Steeler fans on Twitter complaining about this or this thing that their team is going to do or that thing that their team is going to do or this or that. And some of it is valid. Especially when it came to years ignoring the secondary in the draft, especially the corner position, because that was probably a contributing factor as to why Big Ben doesn't have a third Lombardi trophy, maybe more. Was that inability to address that and the lack of desire and willingness to address the secondary for years. Now they've started to do that, and they've done an adequate job. Their work's not done there, but they've slowly started to rebuild that secondary. But again, at the end of the day, while it's a glaring need, you also look at it from the Pittsburgh Steelers standpoint. You have stars on both sides of the ball. You got to pay those guys. It's not like the old days where you can sit there and beat the steel curtain and you keep Mean Joe Green and Mel Blount and Jack Ham and Jack Lambert for their entire careers. And you have other guys around him over the years like Andy Russell that stays there forever, L.C. Greenwood, Ernie Holmes, Dwight White. You just, Donnie Shell. I mean, it just, and on offense, you keep Terry Bradshaw and Franco Harris and Stallworth and Swan for their entire careers, and Mike Webster and so on, Rocky Blyer. That's just not the reality. You can't have those totally complete teams without any real weaknesses. I mean, you deal with the salary cap and free agency. It's just a different world. It's just a different football environment. So, frankly, a lot of these Steelers fans, to me, need to stop whining. I just had to say that because I felt it was appropriate. Doesn't mean you can't be frustrated. But I'll tell you what, I'll take your recent run, and you can have my past 8 years with Jay Cutler as the Bears quarterback. That's right, sit down and shut up. Could always be worse, I promise you. Promise you. But you do look at the Pittsburgh Steelers in the interest of fairness, and you see a team with the explosive elements they have in their offense, the fact that they have an elite quarterback, they have arguably the best all-around running back in the National Football League, arguably the best wide receiver in the National Football League, and you see a team that should be able to impose its will on others offensively and, in theory, should be able to contend for championships and win championships. So you get guys like Terry Bradshaw talking about how they don't really view Mike Tomlin as a great X's and O type of coach, more of like a cheerleader rah-rah type of guy. Well, in some ways that could come across as insulting, and it is a little bit because at the end of the day, this dude has taken his team to 2 Super Bowls and won one, so he's not a scrub. You got to say sometimes you wonder if there is at least a little something to that. Because when you look at some of the talent that the Steelers do have, especially in the offensive side of the ball, you wonder why they haven't won a Lombardi trophy over the past couple of years. But even with that said, it's not like the Steelers had a bad year. You're still talking about a team that went 11-5. They won the AFC North. They beat Miami in the wild card round. They went on the road in the divisional round to a well-balanced and complete Kansas City Chiefs team and went there and beat them no matter what anybody wants to say about it. They got the job done. But they just got outclassed by a superior quarterback, a superior coach, and a superior team and organization in the New England Patriots in the AFC Championship game. And frankly, how many teams could say that over the fucking years? Ask Peyton Manning early in his career what that felt like. Just one example of many. It happens. But the truth of the matter is, there aren't that many teams that can actually be in the mix to be thought of as a Super Bowl contender. And this year, I looked at the Pittsburgh Steelers and thought they were one of the few. You could talk about some of the failures and shortcomings of the team, but they were still one of the best teams in football. And they were one of the Final Four because they had the formula to be in that mix, to be in the Final Four. They just laid a fucking egg in the AFC Championship game, and that shit happens. But at the same point in time, from a Steelers fan standpoint, you do have to get frustrated because you see potentially the window of opportunity closing just a little bit as Big Ben starts to get up there in age. You see after the divisional round game against Kansas City, Antonio Brown's recording Mike Tomlin's locker room speech and posting it on social media where Mike Tomlin's saying some shit about New England and that Bill Belichick will potentially use that to motivate his guys. Just an incredibly selfish, stupid fucking thing to do. And it speaks to sometimes the lack of awareness of athletes in general in today's sporting world. What would possess you instead of listening to your coach to post that shit? Clearly make it about yourself because you cared more about yourself than you did your fucking team. It was dumb, and he deserved to be clowned. And frankly, if anything, to me, I felt like it was the type of situation where you maybe should have pulled Antonio Brown from some game action in the AFC Championship game to send a message. Because at the end of the day, the only message that was sent was that the New England Patriots said, you weren't ready for the Super Bowl, bitches, and we're going to bury your asses. Why not at least send a message to your locker room that type of shit is not acceptable, that you're not going to allow that? I mean, it's just a shame. You look at Antonio Brown, he's such a splendid talent, such a wonderful player, and such a great story. Former 6th round pick wide receiver back in 2010 out of the fucking MAC. And here's this dude doing dumb shit like this. I mean, just why? But then you get to the AFC Championship game, and one of the things in recent years is talking about, oh man, imagine if the Steelers have Le'Veon Bell in the playoffs. Imagine if they get to that point and and they've got everybody healthy, all their big names, their big weapons healthy. Well, you get to the AFC Championship game, and then Le'Veon Bell, let's call it what it was, he fucking pulled a LaDainian Tomlinson and said, I don't want to do it. I don't give a fuck if you got a groin injury or not. You got to at least try to go back out there. I don't care if you are at 100% or you're at 60%. Because frankly, as great as Le'Veon Bell is when he's healthy, 60% Le'Veon Bell is still better than probably 75 to 80% of the running backs in the National Football League. And if anything else, by Le'Veon Bell not choosing to go back out there, I get that he's trying to protect himself from a contract standpoint and so on. But at the end of the day, you don't get this many opportunities to be in this position. You've got to be a football player, not a businessman. Because at the end of the day, maybe you play to get paid, but you also play to win, you would hope, and you play to be in a position to win championships. If you're any type of football player worth your salt at all, you would not want to spend your entire career on a crappy team and just get paid a ton of money. At some point in time, that's not fun. Is that money really worth it? Would you trade half of that money you made to freaking be a part of a championship team? So you're in a position where maybe you're not good enough, but you have a shot. And you decide that you're just going to basically take your helmet off and stand on the sidelines because you've got a groin pull or a groin tear or whatever the fuck was wrong with you. You have got to at least try and play. How could you not? That is a letdown and a slap in the face to that entire locker room, to that coaching staff, to that entire organization. And to yourself. It does yourself a disservice. It's an injustice to yourself and your career and all the great things that you've done in spite of all the stupid things that you've done. Here's a chance to go out there and make a legacy for yourself. Not a name for yourself, but a legacy for yourself. Like, I think about Emmitt Smith, and his legacy to me is not being the all-time leading rusher. His legacy was in the 90s. There was a game against the New York Giants that I think he ran for like 170-something yards on 30-something carries, and he did it with a separated shoulder. That is Emmitt Smith's legacy. Talking about being a football player and his toughness and his leadership and his heart and his desire. And as much as people want to diminish him because he played behind that great offensive line, he had Troy Aikman, he had Michael Irvin and Jay Novacek, and he had Daryl Moose Johnston blocking for him, and and you had all that talent on the Cowboys defense. Emmitt Smith was in a lot of ways the heart and soul of that team, and they don't win shit without that dude. Period. And that will to win is something that sticks with me more than any record that he ever had. Period. That's the type of opportunity that Le'Veon Bell had here. Because again, you could sit there and talk about, well, if he's not 100%, is he really helping the team? Even just by being out there and trying to go, even if he only touches the ball a couple of times, even if he's just used as a decoy, the New England Patriots still have to account for him on defense. Now that he's not out there, they can just focus on trying to shut down Antonio Brown, and the whole Steelers thing kind of grinds to a fucking halt. If Steelers fans want to be frustrated about anything, be frustrated at Antonio Brown for being a selfish fucking knucklehead, and be frustrated with Le'Veon Bell for being a pussy when his team needed him the most. That's, to me, the Steelers' season in a nutshell. A team that could have went all the way, could have gotten to the Super Bowl, but ultimately didn't because I think of some self-inflicted wounds and some questionable decisions. Now, in terms of this offseason, as you talk about with the Steelers, it seems like they're always perpetually in a place where they don't have a ton of salary cap space. And that's part of the byproduct of being a good organization over the years that has good players. Sometimes you have to let good players go. Sometimes you have to pay a ton of money to keep your stars, and that's what they've done. They've already re-signed Antonio Brown and given him big money. They placed the exclusive franchise tag on Le'Veon Bell, which is exactly at the end of the day what I still would have done, even with what happened in the AFC Championship game and him not wanting to go back in the game, even with some of the drug stuff over the years and so on. At the end of the day, Le'Veon Bell is a difference maker, and you see the difference in that offense when he's in there as opposed to when he's not. You can talk about devaluing the running back position all you want, but when Le'Veon Bell is in there, they are a championship type of offense, and they are an entirely different team. So they have to make sure that he's there long term. I mean, they don't have a ton of big-name free agents where you got like Jarvis Jones and Loris Timmons. Frankly, you're at this point in time with both of those linebackers, you could probably let them go and you'd be just fine. You're not going to miss much, honestly, especially in the case of Jarvis Jones. Timmons has regressed, but I'd be much more opposed to losing him as opposed to Jarvis Jones. Jarvis Jones was just a flop. I remember this is Jarvis Jones back in 2013. A lot of people thought the world of. I didn't, but a lot of people did. The key for the Steelers, though, because they are close at the end of the day, as long as you've got Big Ben, you've got Antonio Brown, you've got Le'Veon Bell, and some of the players that you have on that team, you're close. You need to find difference makers. And that's what it comes down to for the Steelers in this draft class especially. I don't know that they need 6 players to come out of this draft. I know that they need 2 or 3 really, really good ones. So this is the type of team based off of their position, based off of where they at, based off of where their team is, that I would implore upon them to make sure that they get those quality talents, those guys that can come in and impact immediately and be difference makers. You need difference makers to win a championship. If that requires trading up in the first round, if that requires giving up additional picks later on in the draft to move up again into round 1 or move up in round 2, then that's what you need to do. Because you need an impact pass rusher really bad to go opposite Bud Dupree, because how much longer is James Harrison going to be able to play at a decent level at age 39? You need help at inside linebacker opposite Ryan Shazier, especially if you allow Lawrence Timmons to leave for your free agency. Frankly, I think they still need help at safety. Thought Sean Davis had some moments. And I like the fact that this team has started to address the secondary with guys like Sean Davis and then a first-round pick last year, Artie Burns, who, mind you, a lot of Steelers fans were upset with, but he got better, I think, as the year went along. Still got a ways to go. But I still think they could use more help back there in the secondary, and will continue to need more help back there for a couple of years. I also think offensively, they could use somebody else at wide receiver, because they've got a bunch of just guys there. They don't have a dude there opposite Antonio Brown. Like, part of what really hurt that offense is not having Martavis Bryant for the season, because he had some dude factor opposite Antonio Brown. And when he was there, man, oh man, you've got him and Brown on the outside. You've got Le'Veon Bell in the backfield and Big Ben throwing the ball. That's a scary offense. The Steelers, being an offense-first team and ultimately going to be a team that wins the Super Bowl or not based off of the strength of their offense and the proficiency of the power and production of their offense, then it could behoove them to get some wide receiver talent, to get some balance to that offense. Again, at the end of the day, though, I understand why Steeler fans are frustrated, but you're being a little whiny and spoiled. I get why you're spoiled. You've been spoiled for years. You deserve to be spoiled. But your team's not that far away. Frustrating finish to the season, yes. But at least you could say you're really close. And if your organization does some things right in one offseason, you could potentially be winning Super Bowl 52.